Welcome back. I'm Chris Ely, your host today. We're going to talk about marriages today and how it's affecting the family. Joining us now is Dr. Alicia Fish. He's from the Taconic Counseling Group. Thank you so much for coming today.
Good morning.
What are you noticing? I mean, we know the statistics are very high on the divorce rate. What are marriages going through right now in our society?
Well, I think two phenomena are probably the most influential in putting stresses on marriage. One has to do with the gender role change. With the advent of the 60s, which was a very exciting time, and the idea of gender equality, came a lot of interesting and positive changes, but a lot of stresses. So, for example, in a traditional world in which, in a sense, everybody knew his or her place, you didn't have to negotiate everything. As soon as you start going for gender equality, role equality, which, by the way, I'm in favor of, it means that things are less clear, need to be discussed. As soon as things have to be discussed, the possibility of communication glitches enter in. So communication, which everybody talks about and is either a narrow or a broad idea, depending on how you think about it, communication is tough. And as people have to begin to figure out who's doing what in a kind of reinventing the wheel all the time, you increase the stresses. So that's number one. I think that the gender and role shifts that have come with that. The second has to do, also I think partly a product of the 60s, is an increase in expectation for personal self-actualization, for happiness. I mean, nobody's against happiness, but I think that the kinds of expectations that everybody has to be happy, to be loved, to be fulfilled, are to some degree unmeetable. And so spouses are always, in a sense, therefore, falling short of what are, I think, to some degree, idealized expectations. Again, creates disappointment, creates stress, creates conflict.
Mm-hmm. That reminds me of a graph I once saw where they had statistics on couples who had a very satisfying marriage, but on a scale of 1 to 10, when they went into the marriage, they were only expecting a 5, and the marriage turned out to be like a 7, so they were really happy in the marriage. And then there were people who were expecting the marriage to be a 10, and their marriage was an 8, and they weren't happy. And I could see how that, affects you once you're in that marriage.
Absolutely. I think it's a fabulous point. It really is. And there are a lot of paradoxes in life, and especially in marriage. To some degree, the more you need, the less you get. The more you want, the less you get. The less you want, the more you get. I mean, they're
So it's going against everything we're really after with the me society. It's like we're supposed to be giving, and then it kind of snowballs in the marriage. And I was thinking of what you said earlier with the gender role. I know people who are in the dating game, and nobody even knows how to date anymore because of that very thing, especially right. Older people who may have dated one way when they were younger, right. And everything's changed and they don't even know who pays and this and that.
Right.
So is this what you're saying is happening once they're married? They don't know who's to do what, and it's cause for need for more communication?
That's right. Because there is that role unclarity, you need to communicate. And, let me talk for a moment about communication, since I think that communication, which is the central tool of any relationship, and the more challenging the relationship, the more you need that tool to work. Communication, which is essentially the exchange of ideas and feelings between two people with the goal of connecting and reaching each other. That, as opposed to, for example, a lot of people, when they get upset or when they have a need, don't really treat communication as a two-way street or as a mutual exercise. Really treat it more as a venting. I want to say what's on my chest. I want to say what I think. That usually is the death knell for communication. As soon as a person is primarily focused on what they want to say, and at that point, no longer interested in what their spouse or partner wants to say, communication is going to fail. So there are two main elements in communication for it to work. And I think everybody can relate to this because it's something we all need. One is to feel accurately heard. Many arguments that I see with couples break down because one person said, I said this, no you didn't. You know, or you said this, no I didn't say that, or you meant that, no I didn't mean that. The accuracy with which you feel heard is the number one thing that has to be achieved. And the second thing is empathically understood. Empathy is the glue of every relationship. It's the ability to put yourself in the shoes of the other person and to compassionately feel what they feel. I think we're hardwired for empathy. I think that's the basis for infant-mom communication. And it breaks down over time. People lose the capacity for empathy. There are a lot of reasons for it. We don't have the time to go into it. But when I work with couples on communication, those are the two major elements I work on. One is to make sure that that each person feels accurately heard and that they feel empathically understood. If you give me that accuracy, if you give me that empathy, I'm going to feel generous towards you, and I'm going to want to give the same thing back to you. I'm going to want to give you the opportunity to feel heard as well, and to feel empathically understood as well. And based on that, we start generating a very different dynamic in the communication, and good things begin to happen.
You know, it is very interesting because there's a lot of books out there too on how to communicate and love somebody in their love language. You know, I'm thinking of the one book of love languages. There's, you know, there's just tons of books like His Needs, Her Needs, and it is amazing that once you tap into some of these skills, how you can really begin to see some really good changes. And it is unfortunate because, you know, when two people come together, they want to be together.
I know. And
then they just face all these like daily challenges to communicate, and it isn't something we really learn.
Absolutely. There is no profession in the world that would recruit people to jobs with as little training as we get to be parents or to be spouses. I absolutely agree with you. One of the other major challenges of marriages is difference, how to manage difference. Anytime two people come together, they're bringing a difference of some kind. Differences or minor differences. And often the differences are initially a source of attraction. The old saying, opposites attract, is largely true. And even if it's not opposites, we are attracted to something about the other person that we don't have, that is different from who we are. And tragically, so much in marriages, those differences, originally a source of attraction, become a source of conflict. And so, again, a major challenge in marriage is how to deal with the fact that we are different, that we have to find some way to bring those differences together. Now, again, I see communication as a major tool in achieving that, as I see communication as a major tool in achieving a lot of the developmental tasks of a marriage. But that's one of the major ones.
So do you think people should have more similarities before they get married? Do you think they're not really, you know, like I've seen this so many times where people get so caught up in the hoopla of the wedding, and like you said, they're not preparing on their relationship.
No, they're not.
And they get very sidetracked. I mean, especially like if it takes them, you know, they may have dated 6 months to a year, and now they're planning a wedding for a year, and their entire life gets consumed on that as opposed to working on the relationship.
Well, there are two things in what you're saying. First of all, I'm a strong advocate in premarital relationship training. I think that it's unconscionable for anybody to go into marriage without having done a certain amount of relationship training. And there are religious organizations that do that. There are public and private organizations that do that. Our group happens to have a program around that. So that's number one. Your point about should people be more alike, I don't think we'll ever be able to govern the chemistry of attraction. So it's not like people can say, oh, I think I ought to pick somebody more like me. They're going to be governed by the chemistry of attraction. The real key question is, what makes this other person attractive to you? And what does that say about who you are, what you need, and how you're going to work with that? So I don't think we can influence who people choose, but I think we can influence what they do once they choose that person.
Well, and it is an interesting point that you brought up. If you learn how to address the differences, then down the road, I can see how you could easily grow together, and even though you have those differences. Again,
good point, because one of the things that I think happens in successful marriages is people do over time become more alike. They don't change places, they don't become exactly like each other, but they grow toward each other. And I think that that is one of the hallmarks of a successful marriage.
And what is the point when someone's not having a successful marriage, when they should seek counseling?
Immediately. There are so many unfortunate stories that I run into around this. The sooner you identify and act on a problem, the smaller the problem is, the less damage has taken place, the more remediable it is. Unfortunately, there is generally, and it's usually a man, the husband in the marriage, who says, no, we don't have a problem, and anyway, if we did have a problem, we can deal with it ourselves. I once had one couple that came in where the guy had been saying for 3 years, I'd rather be divorced than to go into marital therapy. And finally she said, okay, I want a divorce. And he said, can we go into marital therapy now? You know? So it was unfortunately too late. Too much damage had been done, and so don't wait.
Don't wait. And you know, I want you to come back again, we're out of time, and talk about how that damage takes place and, you know, the different things you can do to catch it in time and repair it. So we'll have to have you back on. But we're out of time, so I want to thank you for watching, and I encourage you to write to Jan and Paul Crouch at TBN, P.O. Box A, Santa Ana, California, 92711. Tell them how much you love Join Our Town here in New York.